I found a book in the library that's about me. Now I'm afraid for my life. Written by North Selection 9. This is something that happened a few days ago, and I've been freaking out about it ever since. Being a longtime reader of Nosleep, I figured that there was no better place than to post this here. I don't know how long I have left. I've never been good with deadlines. You see, that's how I found myself in the library, searching through the shelves in a monster energy-fueled haze for a few credible sources to help me write the last few paragraphs of my English literature essay before I handed it in. I had meant to finish it a week earlier, but life had decided to throw me a few hurdles. My phone had broken, my girlfriend and I had ended things, and my grandfather had died. In the gray void that had consumed my life, I somehow managed to remember my other obligations, and I decided that I wasn't going to add failing grades to them. I knew I wasn't going to get a good grade, but all I prayed for was a passing one. My eyes scanned along the leafy spines of the books for anything on Charles Dickens. The biography of Charles Dickens, Charles Dickens, A Life, the complete compendium of Charles Dickens. I grabbed them all and quickly added them to the towering pile in my arms. I struggled over to my empty desk and I slid them onto the surface beside my laptop. It was just enough for me to finish and never want to look at anything related to Charles Dickens for the remainder of my life. There was always something so calming about the silence of the library. Occasionally, I would distract myself from my work-related anxieties by watching others work on their own projects or browse through the shelves. Still looking up, I blindly pulled open the book to memorize the page number that I had been reading from my bibliography. But clutched in my hands was a book that I had no memory of taking off the shelves. It stuck out like a sore thumb amidst the assorted pile. It was one of those heavy, leather-bound books that were the staple of academia. A thin film of dust clung to its front cover, which was blank of any title or illustrations that might indicate what it was about. I assumed that it was a notebook that someone had left behind while studying, but it was too thick and a cursory glance inside revealed blank pages. Of course, I couldn't resist the opportunity to skim through it. After what seemed like 20 or more blank pages, I found my interest waning. But just as I was about to close it shut, I saw something that made my heart stop. There, in bold black print in the form of a chapter title, was my full name. Below the heading, at the top right corner of the page, there was an accompanying illustration of my face, drawn in a hollow-eyed, retro-Gothic way that reminded me of Edward Gorey. There was something innocent yet unsettling about it. I looked around my desk, my headphone trailing out of my ear. The people around me continued with whatever they were doing, oblivious to my shock. My gaze fell back down upon the book that I held in my hands. I just wanted to close it and wedge it back on whatever shelf I had found it. But my trembling fingers found themselves already turning the page. As I read on, I realized it was the story of my entire life, starting with my birth and continuing into my early childhood, all with accompanying illustrations in that unsettling style. I watched myself grow from a baby to a smiling child to an awkward-looking preteen. The words accompanying the images didn't skim away from any aspect. Everything was laid bare. From my dreams to my darkest secrets, the ones that I swore I would take with me to my grave. The book knew everything about me. Nausea swelled up. Bile rose in my throat. Yet I couldn't tear my eyes away from the story that was unfolding in front of my very eyes. My very own story. As I read, I peered into the spaces of shelves, expecting someone to jump out and reveal that it was all just a prank. But as the minutes ticked on and no one did, my fears seemed to grow by the second. The book went on through my high school days, to getting my acceptance letter into high school, to meeting my girlfriend, right up to the point of me finding the book and reading it. At the bottom of the page, there was an illustration of me hunched over the desk while reading it. As I stared at that, my head throbbed even more. I stared at the page and I wondered whether I should turn it over. I had no idea what would be on the other side. My thumb trembled over the corner, peeling it up into a dog ear. Unable to stand it any longer, I turned the page. The next few pages didn't have any words, just illustrations, larger than the ones that had come before, taking up the entire page. They showed me on my daily routine, in lectures, riding the bus, listening to music, all of the things that I usually did. But there was just something off about them. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. It took me a few glances before I realized why. There, hidden in the background of the first drawing of me, was a shadowy figure. It was watching me as I walked down the street, my earphones tucked into my ears and my back turned to it, completely unaware. As I shifted through the progressing images, it seemed to be drawing in closer and closer. I could make it out more clearly. It was draped in a long, dark hood, the billowing sleeves pulling over their wrist and the hood veiling its face. It had gone from being 20 feet away from me to just a few steps behind me, while I just wore the same casual expression. I had never felt so threatened by a drawing than I had at that moment. That thing seemed to radiate pure evil. It was the final illustration that made my shaking joints lock into place, fusing me into my seat. It was me, sleeping, unaware of the figure that now stood in front of my bed. It stretched over me and the sleeves fell back, revealing grasping, elongated claws that were just inches from touching my face. The next few pages after that were all blank. I sat there, my head revolving with pure animal panic as I struggled to make sense of what I had just read. I just wanted to get up from my chair, but I knew that I would probably pass out. I just started glaring at the white pages before tossing it away. I never wanted to see it again in my life. But the book seemed to have other plans. When I arrived back at my dorm, I found it lying on my bedroom dresser, even though I knew that I hadn't checked it out. Even after wedging it back into the shelf where I had found it, I would come home to find it just lying out of the corner of my sight, where I was bound to notice it eventually. I tore out the pages, but it would always return to the same immaculate condition that I had found it in. I even tried burning it, but I would find it lying amongst the ashes, not even singed by the flames. I haven't dared open it for fear of what else might be inside. I don't want to post any pictures of it online, even when I know that there'll be some of you out there breathing down my neck for proof. The words seemed to write themselves as I read it. I think that it varies from person to person. The thought of inflicting this on anyone else is worse than whatever will happen to me. Wherever I go now, I can always feel someone watching me. They're hidden in the passing crowds on the street, or amongst the many heads in a lecture room. It only reinforces my sudden desire to never leave my room. But I know that I'm not safe, even there. I wish that I had never picked up that book. Whatever was trapped inside of it, it's coming for me now, and I can't stop it. I've found some strange writings, written by ThousandThorns. I've recently moved into a new house. It's a little old and dusty and beaten up, but I've been working on fixing it up and making it into a home. A large pile of junk was left in the basement, which I've been sifting through and getting rid of when I've had time. And today I found a stack of boxes full of random written articles and things which might have been related to the work of the previous owner. I almost chucked the whole lot away, but I found something scattered loosely in one of the boxes. It's a page of writing a lot different to the articles. It seems like his own personal writings that he might have wanted someone else to see, but he never got a chance to show them to anyone for some reason or another. It's pretty strange, and I don't know if it's the right thing to do, but I thought that I'd post it here and look through the stuff again when I have time. There might be more. Anyway, I'll just dive right into it. Unfortunately, I can't give any specific details like dates because he didn't even date these or otherwise headline the writing himself. I mean, I'm not even sure it's a man. It could have been a woman. But here goes. It was the most difficult decision to make in beginning to put my experiences of late into words, fearing that I may somehow be bringing a layer of reality into them. Heaven forbid such a thing. It is most curious, however, that I find myself even troubled at all. Our human mind, the immense and complex thing that it is, appears to struggle profusely with comprehending the concept of something which has stirred within its depths and risen to the surface to disturb and perplex its master. For we are masters of our own mind, are we not? At least this is what I have always believed, what I've always felt. Recently, however, I find something that I struggle to comprehend reaching to me from somewhere deep within, somewhere in the deepest, darkest reaches. A black void of untapped consciousness speaking profane and garbled words to me. The words, however garbled they may be, somehow seem to make sense at times. Many nights I find myself awake with but an echo of a whisper remaining within my recollection of my time being asleep. A whisper of a strange voice. A disembodied voice speaking in a language that is unknown and yet somehow familiar. It is not that I can understand in the usual sense that our minds are accustomed to, but I believe I can feel what is trying to be said physically. Is such a form of communication even possible? I cannot discern any known reason within me for believing that something may be attempting to communicate with me. To communicate a story of something strange, something deep, somewhere untouched by our own human hands. Unsoiled by our sometimes ghastly human influence. A place wherein we are unable to defile and warp the dominance and influence of nature itself. Such whispers to me occur only within the dead of the night, during my times of unintended slumber, waking at my desk with my head resting upon my writings. That strange voice from the depths, still there somehow, finishing off its tale of a time when a force will awaken from an unfathomable amount of time in a deep slumber. This force is to reclaim something which it previously asserted unchallenged dominance over, before it was somehow swindled out of control. Swindled may be the incorrect term to use. However, if there is a correct term, I'm unsure of what it may be. In my moments just after wakefulness, I have also been exposed to what may have been actual visual interpretations of these tidings, of the strange voice's attempts to explain. This is nothing that I am able to describe with words. And yet, I will still go against my initial urge not to attempt to do so. These images, or otherwise visually inclined communications seem to feature many strange movements obscured in darkness. A darkness almost too complete to be able to pierce with my own limited human vision. Yet what I do see are some form of dark, writhing masses of indescribable origin. A strangely wretched and pulsating form of sentience. These particular recollections have occurred almost daily for the last few weeks now. Somehow, they almost seem to be a repeat of themselves. A sort of reoccurring nightmare, if I am to describe it in a term simpler to understand as a whole. The origin of this form seems nothing but a dark void within my own mind. A void that is not a simple, static darkness, but a strangely shimmering, undulating surrounding of shadow. Yet somehow, I am able to discern this shadowy mass apart from the pulsating darkness which surrounds it. Perhaps this is its method of making itself perceivable to me. A method to reduce the stress of trying to comprehend whatever this force may be which communicates with me from within my mind. If I were asked to confirm whether this method does in fact remove some of my stress, however, I would have to say that it does not. I am becoming somewhat concerned for myself and my sanity. To be entirely honest with whomever may take the time to read my incessant rambling about the fact that I may or may not somehow be losing my mind. The barely discernible images that I see in my moments of just having woken are something that I struggle greatly to explain and describe for our comprehension, both yours and mine. The one which troubles me the most is the image of this dark, writhing mass, seemingly to rise upwards through this black void. I can almost feel a wave of force pulsating outwards as a result of its movement, as if its titanic self causes the entire reality that it exists within to ripple and open in its wake. My human mind reasons with me that such a strange entity could not possibly exist. The logical aspects of my consciousness denies this entirely, and attempts with all of its might to erase it from my perception. The fragments that I am left with, those that it could not get to in time before I awoke, are mildly troubling on their own, and I find that I am somehow willing myself to allow the full understanding to never reach me, for I fear the toll on my mind would be too great. In all fairness, what you are hearing now may be nothing more than the babbling of a man descending into some form or another of madness. But I do thank you for taking the time to listen, and know that it would give me some form of comfort to know that I am not alone in trying to comprehend the strangeness of the marvel that is our minds.